waiting for us in the woods. There's a fight out there. So we have to be extremely careful. Life is really experience. And if I don't have that life, and I know they go mountains so without me, that is my favorite.
This was a training ground of sorts, and the mountains were already more than a view to Lekka. She wanted to be in them to see what they could see. They were, she tells me, her friends.
Even though they just the mountains, jungles, and nature are one of the best things. And I think it's very fun. I fall.
What was your relationship with Mount Everest?
And the view of Sakuma, Mount Everest, from there was extremely beautiful. Makalu is a mountain neighbor to Everest. It's the 5th highest mountain in the world. And so ever since I was a little girl, because of that view, I always wanted to go up, climb the mountain, and see what it would feel like to be up there. In fact, even when we didn't have shoes on us, we would just walk casually to Camp 1 or Camp 2. And whenever I got a chance, I would analyze which way would be the best to climb Mount Everest. So yeah, I respected the mountains a lot. They humbled me. And the mountains were like my hero.
I just want to know I understood this properly. But did you say that when you were a little child, you would walk to base camp in your bare feet? A friend of mine made such a song and dance about walking in, and he had, oh my god, I can't tell you how much equipment he had just to get to base camp, and you're telling me as a little girl, you'd go there without shoes.
I cannot believe Peter's right now. I don't have shoes. And my feet right now, I'm going to look like American lady. I'm walking with a shoes. I make them so happy.
I mean, that's incredible. It sounds like it was so part of your life, and it sounds like you were plotting to climb Everest, even when you were very little. So what did you think of all these foreigners coming to your mountain range with the aim of climbing this mountain?
What can I say? It's Nepal with tourists around the kids. When I first saw the tourists come to the area, I thought they were not like us. They looked different. They had different hair. My sisters and I, we have black hair, but their hair, it was not black. It was very different. Their skin colors were different, and we were a little confused about that. But we were also curious about their countries, and I wondered, what would it be like if I got a chance to go there? I felt like whatever new thing there is, I have to learn it. I'm going to learn it.
When did you get the idea that you could work outdoors on the mountain?
I was around 15 when I first saw the tourists. They were British, and they had come to Makalu for shopping. And in this group, there were both men and women, which I was surprised to see. This was how I first learned about the trekking and hiking, and it was the first time I realized that I could work as a porter.
How did your parents react when you told them that you wanted to work out there on the mountains?
My parents had almost given up on changing my mind because I was really interested only in going outdoors and climbing mountains. And I also had a really big body, which is very unusual for girls and people my age. I even cut my hair so no one would know that I was a girl. Because if they knew that I was a girl, they would not give me work at all. I really liked working as a porter, and I was really interested in it. Because I rebelled, because I really challenged my parents' decision, they just let me go. So eventually eventually, I followed the tourists to Kathmandu to be a porter and to get into this climbing business.
काठमाडौँ त्यही विदेशी फलो गरेर चाहिँ काठमाडौँ आएको थियो होइन
And did anybody realize that you were actually a girl? And that this Sherpa that was helping them wasn't the boy that you were pretending to be?
The tourists did not know that I was a girl, but the other Sherpas and porters that I trekked with, they knew. But because I worked so hard and because I could carry anything that they gave me, they didn't mind it. And they respected me and respected my strength. I became like the best friend.
मलाई त उनीहरूको बेस्ट पनि ठान्थ्यो
And how was this changing your life, this new job as a Sherpa?
मैले त बिगिनिङ
From the very beginning, I was very proactive in all my work. I worked as a porter and I even worked in setting up the tents for the tourists who would come hiking and camping. I would just speed ahead of the group. And then I would set up kitchen, I would cook, I would even wash the dishes. I was always very busy. So I was involved in all of it from the very beginning.
एकदम बिगिनिङ नै लर्निङ गरेको
But Lakpa's life was about to change again. At 18, she had a relationship and a baby boy. She was young, unsupported, and there weren't any doctors available for her birth. She described it to me as simply difficult. But they both survived, and together Lakpa and her son Nima moved to Kathmandu. Her love for the mountains didn't fade, but Lakpa now needed to find work that could support them both and that she could do with a baby on her hip.
कस्तो छ
When I worked as a porter, I'd save some money, and Kathmandu was very cheap back then. So I had set up a tea house in front of the teaching hospital in Maharajganj.
चाउमिनहरू रुटी
I had 2 tables and I would cook chow mein, I would make tea, I would sell tongba, and the doctors from the teaching hospital would come and ask for all of these food items. I'd have my baby with me, I'd hold my baby and I'd do all of these things and I'd work.
दुईवटा टेबलमा चाहिँ बिजनेस सुरु गरेको थियो
Did you ever think you'd be a Sherpa again? You were a long way now from your dream and from the mountain.
अब म जहिले पनि मैले
When I came to Kathmandu, I lost the view of the mountains, but I longed to see that view again.
काठमाडौँ त मैले देखेन माउन्टेनै देखेन त्यो माउन्टेनको भ्यू नै गयो मेरो आँखाबाट होइन
I wanted to find a way to go back, something I could do that would take me back there. In Kathmandu, my life was, well, I wasn't there because I wanted to be. I was there because I had to be.
आरले होइन काठमाडौँमा चाहिँ रारले बसेको जस्तो के म
Do you remember when you first got the idea that you wanted to attempt Mount Everest, to climb the summit?
मैले चाहिँ के अरे यो पासुङमा
Pasundamu Sherpa was the first woman to summit Mount Everest. She passed away after summiting the mountain, and you can say that I followed in her footsteps.
मलाई यति एक्सपिरियन्स छ
I thought I have so much experience as a porter over all of these years, and I'm strong, and I'm not afraid of the mountains. So I wanted to follow in her footsteps.
पासुङमा गएको ठाउँमा चाहिँ म पनि जान्छु भने जस्तो मेरो मनमा लागेको थियो कि
Pasang Lamu Sherpa is a national hero in Nepal. In 1993, she became the first Nepalese woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest, and her statue stands in Kathmandu. But she never made it back down from the summit. Trapped by terrible weather for days, by the time anyone could reach her, she had died.
गर्नु सक्छ होला म ताकार थियो होइन मलाई दाग चाहिँ
Even though she died after summiting the mountain, I was not scared by that. I just wanted to see the place where she had taken her last breath. And I wanted to learn from all of it.
लर्निङ गर्नुपर्ने के हेर्नुपर्ने के फिजिकल गयो
With her baby by her side, Lakpa continued serving tea to the city's busy professionals, and she would tell anyone who would listen about her plan to become the next woman to summit Mount Everest.
मेरो चाहिँ सानो टी हाउस थियो मैले जहिले
A lot of my customers were educated people,
नेपाली डाक्टरहरू त्यस्तो एजुकेटरहरू चाहिँ मेरो
doctors and professionals like that. And when I expressed my desire to summit the mountain, they would just dismiss it and say, "You won't be able to climb the mountain. You're better suited to sell the tea."
चिया बेचेर बस भन्दै के कुनीले
Lakpa needed a way to prove herself in this new environment. One day, she saw an advert for a grueling long-distance women's race, and she decided to enter. And of course, she won. It gave her some money, a little visibility, and something she could point at to prove what her body was capable of. Lakpa's world at this time was her child and her tea house, and now she did everything she could to bring her mountain dream into that world. It started with her skeptical customers.
फेरि मैले म stopै गर्दै जुन आइपुग्दै
I was unrelenting asking them questions about summiting the mountain. It was like I was a news anchor and I would ask questions to whoever came to the tea house. I'd tell them I want to climb that mountain. It's my ambition. How can I do that? I would ask this question to everyone.
सानोदेखि मेरो रागा र मेरो इच्छा हो भन्थे कि
And when all these people were telling you, you're never going to do it, what did you think?
Oh, these people would say, how can you? You're a woman and not even men can easily climb the mountains.
तपाईँले गर्न सक्छ केटी मान्छेले त एभरेज चढ्छ
They would say that, but then I thought, I am a woman and yet I've worked as a porter. And I have so much experience. I've always wanted to climb the mountains, so I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to let anything stop me.
किन गर्न सक्दैन एभरेज चाहिँ म त गर्न सक्छु भन्ने मेरो आँट थियो कि म त्यस्तो
Finally, one day, Lakpa's persistence paid off.
किनभने चाहिँ अनि एकजना मान्छेले चाहिँ
There was this one person who was apparently a very senior police officer with a lot of influence, and he encouraged me to write a letter to the Prime Minister, Girja Prasad Koirala. He claimed that he knew the Prime Minister, and so I asked him to help me to write this letter, and he did.
प्लिज लेटर लेखिदिनु मलाई
I'd always been talking about my desire to summit the mountain, so I said, okay, let's do it. That's how we got the idea.
Remarkably, Lakpa's letter not only reached the Prime Minister, but he thought it was a great idea. An all-women Nepalese team was assembled to attempt the summit of Mount Everest, and in front of the cameras, Lakpa was named as its leader. In an archive from the time, Lakpa was asked by a journalist whether she's worried by the fact that people die attempting Everest.
चढ्न नसकेको मान्छेहरू त्यो असफल
Is she worried she can die too? She answers with an even gaze.
लाग्छ र धेरै हाम्रो नेपाली जाँदाहरू पनि लडाइँमा आर्मीमा पुलिसमा मर्नुहुन्छ
A lot of Nepalese people die in the army or police, she says. Many things are dangerous, but should the country hold itself back by not trying? It's easy to forget that she's barely 20 years old at this time, a young woman who was denied an education, sitting comfortably despite the doubtful glare of her country's media.
त्यो कमेन्ट अब कमेन्टहरू त अब
They said that because it is Lakpa's dream and Lakpa is the one who wrote the letter to the Prime Minister and started everything, she should lead the team. And also because I had experience as a coolie, as a porter, all these years of experience, that's why I was chosen to lead.
As you were climbing, one by one, the other women dropped out. When did you realize that you'd be the only one making it to the summit?
उनीहरू पनि सक्ने हो होइन अब उनीहरूले चाहिँ अलिकति
It's not that they couldn't summit the mountain. It's just that they had a lack of experience and lack of training. And for me, I'd always wanted to climb the mountain ever since I was a young girl. But for them, it was a very quick dream.
भने त उनीहरूले पनि सक्ने हो
Severe altitude sickness meant that all her teammates had to abandon the attempt. Lakpa climbed the summit alone, something she was now used to. As a child, she'd carried her brothers to school. Then she proved herself as the only female porter on the mountain before raising her son, all on her own.
एकदम खुसी थियो म एकदम
I was so elated the first time I was able to climb Sagarmatha, Mount Everest.
इजी जस्तो भनेको चाहिँ
I felt like I won a championship. I felt as if I touched the sky and came back. I was on cloud 9.
Did your life change after that?
लाइफ चेन्ज त भएन
It wasn't really life-changing. It just got more difficult.
मोर डिफिकल्ट पो भयो
Why did it get more difficult?
किनभने चाहिँ अब
I was scared that expectations would be raised because I'd climbed Mount Everest. That people would be like, what is she going to do now?
एभरेज केटमा चाहिँ काम गर्यो
I also worried that people would think I was showing off. I was scared about things like that.
त्यसमा कुनै एउटा कुरामा दाग थियो
It sounds like there was a lot of pressure on you, Lakpa. parents react?
Mommy, मेरो मामा चाहिँ every summit गइसकेपछि त उनीहरूले त अब त्यतिकै
My parents, they're from a village, and they don't know what the meaning behind climbing a mountain is and achieving that success, reaching the Everest summit. They don't know anything about that, and they just wondered, what are you actually gaining by climbing the mountain? I also didn't know what I would gain by climbing the mountain. I just wanted to, and I did.
Lakpa Sherpa became the first Nepalese woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest and survive. And afterwards, not only did she tour the streets of Kathmandu in a victory parade, she was also welcomed home to her family for the first time since leaving, unmarried, with her son. Her father, she says, welcomed her with great pride.
My dad can read, right? He's educated. He can read everything, news, and he said, "Wow, I'm very proud. You give a good opportunities in Nepali women. Now, every educated woman going climbing Everest. They not choose the lawyer and doctor pilot. They want to go Everest, not like you." But he told me, "Must be careful, okay? Must be careful. You need to have children. Take care."
Lakpa will go on to summit Mount Everest 9 more times, more than any other woman in the world. But she'll also face moments when she thinks she'll never see the mountains again. In part 2, we'll hear how finding a mountain partner changes everything. After the news.
This is the BBC World Service, and in Suicide's Silent Survivors, Ashley Byrne explores why many countries punish people for trying to take their own life.
So many people, but they don't speak about it.
The reason: deep-rooted religious, social and cultural beliefs.
My parents took me to the police station. I was processed. I spent 3 nights in police cells. And then on Monday I was taken to court and I was fined.
They see this as a sin, and that having it as a law is to defend that it shouldn't be done.
I hear about jail terms, beatings and the impact on loved ones.
More focus is on the family. They're saying you could not handle your family member well. You should have looked after him.
Suicide's Silent Survivors at bbcworldservice.com/documentaries or wherever you get your BBC podcasts.
On Outlook after the news, you'll hear how Lakpa Sherpa's life will take a dangerous turn after meeting a man who could match her pace on the mountain.
When I met him, he seemed fit and strong enough to be someone I could be partnered with because he had summited. He had climbed the mountain without even taking the help of oxygen.
Oxygen नलाइकन चाहदैछ भने मलाई एकदम.
And I felt that you need a partner to climb.
That's after the World Service news.
BBC News with Stuart McIntosh. President Biden has used a highly anticipated press conference in Washington to reject suggestions that he's unfit for another term in the White House. Mr. Biden told reporters he was in good shape and insisted he was the most qualified person to win November's election, but he also mistakenly referred to his deputy, Kamala Harris, as Vice President Trump. Concerns about Mr. Biden's age have led to growing calls for him to step down. Ukraine's president has urged Western allies to drop all limitations on the use of donated weapons. Volodymyr Zelensky told NATO leaders his country's forces needed to be able to hit targets inside Russia. Police in Australia have charged a soldier and her husband with spying for Russia. The couple are Australian citizens with Russian passports. The Israeli Defense Minister has called for a state inquiry into the Hamas attacks on October the 7th. Yoav Gallant was speaking after the military admitted that Israeli forces failed in their duty to protect one community. A man has appeared in court in the US charged with involvement in the White House supremacist plot to blow up an electrical substation. Prosecutors say Andrew Tashkitos unwittingly revealed his plans to an undercover FBI agent. Colombia's president has urged the UN to consider legalizing cocaine worldwide. Gustavo Petro said the move would end the armed conflict in his country within a day. The Japanese company SoftBank has bought a British tech firm that specializes in developing artificial intelligence chips. Graphcore was once seen as a potential rival to the American multinational Nvidia, but its value has dropped significantly in recent years. And people across Britain are being urged to count butterflies to help scientists track the effects of climate change on the insects' falling numbers. BBC News.
Welcome back to Outlook with me, Renita Levine. When Lakba Sherpa was a child, she dreamed of climbing the mountains and would do anything just to be out there, under the sky and amongst nature.
The mountains, the jungles, and nature are like my best friend. And I wasn't scared of them at all.
In part one, we heard how Lakba cut her hair short and dressed as a boy to get her first job as a porter, carrying the heaviest loads up and down the mountains, just to prove she could. A few years later, she had a child, Nima, and moved to Kathmandu to support him. But by this time, Lakba's dreams of the outdoor life, as she calls it, had only grown. She wanted to climb to the top of Mount Everest, and when we left her in 2000, she'd done just that. The first Nepalese woman to reach the summit and survive. Soon after, Lakba's life would change again, very dramatically, when she met another of the world's great Everest climbers, a US-based Romanian called George Dănuescu.
2000 में चाहिँ के अरे जो मेरा हातमा आँगनको ड्याडी चाहिँ भेटेको कुनै
In 2000, when I climbed the mountain George had summited to from the Tibet side, at that time I was feeling like there was no life here in Nepal. I didn't want to stay in Nepal. There's only so much you can do by running a tea house. When I met him, he seemed fit and strong enough to be someone I could be partnered with because he had summited.
अक्सिजन नलाइकन चार्ज भने मलाई एकदम
He had climbed the mountain without even taking the help of oxygen. And I felt that you need a partner to climb.
अब माउन्टेन पार्टनर चाहिँ म जस्तै मान्छे चाहिँ मलाई मेरो सोल पायो भने मेरो सोलमेट.
And it was like he was my mountain partner. And I felt like I met my soulmate.
A year after their first meeting, Lakba climbed to the Everest summit for the second time, now with George by her side and able to match her pace. In America, George had a construction business and he invited Lakba to join him. The work funded return trips to the mountain they loved, and they worked together.
I really liked physical labor, and that's what I got a chance to do. I worked in construction, I did a lot of roofing, I did a lot of painting of the houses as well, and I liked it. I got the work that I really liked.
Eventually, they set up a climbing company. In the years that followed, Lakba summited Everest 4 more times, and they had their first daughter, Sunny. But her husband's behaviour began to change. This might be hard to listen to, because we'll be talking about domestic abuse and violence.
There are a lot of reasons. He's become old and his mind was not in the right place. He climbed a lot of mountains. There was the alcohol as well. I don't really know what to say about this.
These are not years Lakba likes to remember. The couple returned to Mount Everest guiding groups, but among the male hiking groups, drinking was rife, and George could become viciously violent. His strength and temper led to stories of other climbers being carried off the mountain or flown straight to hospitals in their own countries. And one year, Lakba was one of those attacked. It was a brutal episode. Lakba was stretchered off the mountain, unconscious. She would not return for a decade. At home in America, Lakba gave birth to a second baby girl, who she named Shani. But violence had entered her relationship and home. George forbade her from talking about her life to the press or anyone else. Keeping her children safe and surviving now became her sole focus.
A lot of people could see what I was going through. My eyes would get angry. And I thought it was normal.
I can see this is difficult to talk about.
Yeah, I'm with a different kind of thinking about it right now.
Is it difficult?
It's okay, yes.
Lakber, the abuse was getting worse, and on Sonny's 10th birthday, George violently attacked you in front of your children. You ended up in a safe house with your children for 8 months. Can you tell me why that incident changed things for you?
Honestly, when I left my home to go to the safe house with my 2 daughters, we didn't even carry our clothes. All I could think about was, how can I keep them safe? How can I keep my daughters safe? And how can I give them a beautiful and safe life? Because if something happened to my kids, then I wouldn't be able to bear it. Like, if they die, then I die.
बाच्चाको लागि र मेरो लागि चाहिँ अब बाच्चा मऱ्यो भने म पनि मर्ने अनि बाच्चा बाँच्यो भने म पनि बाँच्ने त्यस्तो हिसाबमा चाहिँ दुईटा बाच्चा.
How did you have the strength to leave? You know, when people experience domestic violence, we know it takes many attempts to be strong, to leave a relationship like that. How did you do it?
It was very difficult at that time because even if all those bad things happened, I didn't have the option, the luxury of screaming or yelling. In Nepali culture, if you're married and something happens, if things don't work out between you and your husband and you come back, then it's considered a great shame. So just to avoid that kind of talk, I tried so hard to hide it. But you know, once I started climbing again, people came to know about my divorce and 2 kids, and there was no way that I could hide it. Even after all my efforts, I couldn't hide it.
Remarkably, Lakber did eventually return to climbing. But it was a long, hard slog. After 8 months in that shelter, still with little English, she managed to find a home and regular jobs to pay the bills. She was a carer, a cleaner, a cashier. She also won sole custody of the 2 daughters she had with George. It was when they were finally in school and her son at college that Lakber began to dream again of the mountains.
I've gone through a lot of struggle in my life. I worked at Whole Foods. I was even engaged as a housekeeping staff. But of course, like, I have to make sure that my kids are taken care of, that they can go to school, to college, that I can buy them clothes. And I thought that climbing is one of my jobs. And why should I give it up? Especially because I have so much experience, years and years of experience in this sector. So I was determined to work as a guide, as a porter, or in whatever terms, so that I can put my experience to use.
After a 10-year hiatus, Lakber decided to return to Everest. With 6 summits already under her belt, she was a kind of underground legend in parts of the climbing community, and some found it incredible that the most successful female Everest climber of all time had been living so quietly in Connecticut all this time. The year after her divorce was finalized, Lakber arranged a trip to Nepal, and with her Nepalese family, who work in the climbing business, she arranged her own summit attempt. Like the leeches and snakes that put her through her paces in her childhood, this time round, Lakber says that motherhood was what trained her for the later summits.
You know, once you're a mother, you live a very busy life. You have to take care of the children. And I was also a single mom. I was working and I was so busy that, you know, it felt like some kind of army training. Though perhaps in the army you would have some break, but I didn't.
How did you train? How did you find time to train?
There was that I did as a mother. That is the training. I had to multitask. I had to work a lot to afford the life for my children. And you could say that it is a training for the things that I did on the mountain.
It's a big job. That's a
Very big jump. That's a very
that
big
is
job.
a big job. That is my big tennis ever.
Incredibly, Lakpa went on to climb Everest for a 7th, 8th, 9th, and most recently, a very attention-grabbing 10th time. It's now well over 20 years since she first reached the top of the world's highest mountain.
2000
Back in 2000, the first time I summited the mountain, we had no weather change reports. We had no gear. There was nothing like that. Now we have good gear. We have very good equipment. But there is a change in the weather and the ice is melting. So it's very confusing for me.
आइसहरू पनि धेरै मेल्ट गर्छ त्यतिखेर त पहिले 2000 मा चाहिँ आइसहरू पनि
So back in 2000, the Hillary Step was one of the most difficult paths that you could take. But after the 2015 earthquake, it has been made extremely easy to pass. Now there are so many people, they're just like, it's as if you can only see people on the mountains instead of the ice. And it's a little sad because it seems like there's no respect for the mountain. It's been made to seem very easy to climb the mountain now, although it's not easy. It's actually an extremely difficult job.
तर एभरेस्ट त गाह्रो छ